Hey folks, I'm Auryn, the founder of Gnosis Guild. I've had a long and colorful journey in Web3, but I guess I'm just really captivated by the idea of DAOs, of organizations encoded as programs, or organizational logic encoded as programs, and then just huge privacy and kind of personal autonomy advocate.
Okay, so Auryn, hi. Welcome to the interview. Thank you for being here. So for the record, we are in Berlin and the Web3 Privacy Now hackathon. You are mentoring here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and we have this like Web3 Privacy Academy discussion, just sharing your experience and stuff. So we'll start with you just sharing your like life story a bit, like a few minutes, just for the people to understand the context, like how did you end up where are you now, like what was your like life journey, like briefly?
Yeah, well, this is always a fun discussion. I think I had a pretty atypical journey into Web3.
Yeah.
I just we'll see how far I want to go back. But so I, in a former life, played basketball professionally. So I was out in Australia playing in our national league and kind of fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole after seeing a news broadcast about the dark web, about the deep web. And so I guess like the other bit of backstory there is that I've always been a kind of closet hacker, closet nerd. I've been pulling apart and putting back together, sometimes successfully, computers since I was maybe 10 or 11.
Oh, wow. So you were like into hardware more?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, like that's what you can touch, that's what you can tangibly feel.
It's like Lego, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So I've always enjoyed that. My dad he's a sound engineer. He runs a recording studio. And so he's been, like my whole life, I've had access to a big electronics studio where he would build all of his own hardware. He built like valve amplifiers and all this kind of stuff, built mixing decks. And so I guess, had a somewhat unique exposure there to electronics early on, to computers early on. And to this like hacker mindset early on in terms of just being willing and learning how to pull things apart, put them back together. And so, yeah, I've always been curious. And I obviously started playing sports, and so that became the kind of main focus of mine. But as a backdrop in my downtime, I've always been into hardware, into software. Have been an avid Linux user for decades now, and I had been a hobbyist programmer for decades. Kind of while I was playing basketball, while I was in college. My academic background is in psychology and game theory and research methods. But yeah, anyway, so to bring it all back to where we're at. So I saw this news broadcast on the deep web, the dark web. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'll poke around. So I downloaded the Tor browser, started looking around, and inevitably made my way to some marketplaces, and everything was denominated in Bitcoin. And so the kind of curiosity peaked from there. What is a Bitcoin? What does it mean when somebody says it's 10 Bitcoin? What does that mean in Australian dollars? And so, I kind of started the rabbit hole there, quickly found my way to some of the relatively early Bitcoin forums. And what really piqued my interest was some of Vitalik's early posts about the idea of Ethereum, and in particular, the idea of DAOs, or DACs at the time. I think people were calling them decentralized autonomous corporations. And the idea of being able to program or encode organizational logic as a program, as something that would execute in this kind of autonomous environment, as opposed to, or in addition to, legal encoding. And so that kind of just captivated me, and I've been obsessed with Ethereum and with the blockchain and Web3 ecosystem ever since. I got heavily involved in the DAO in 2016. And obviously that had this kind of meteoric rise, was super exciting, and then catastrophic fall and fallout, resulting in the hard fork of Ethereum and all that good stuff. But from there, made a lot of friends along the way, and have worked in a variety of different roles in different organizations, everything from growth to product management to solidity engineering and architecture and everything in between.
Wow. That's pretty impressive list of roles like you had inside, especially like being with a tech background and going to product markets. And how was for you this shift? And why did you make this? And was it organic for you?
Well, so actually I think, so my academic background is in psychology. I'd always been like a hobbyist programmer. I'd never done anything professional. I'd never written any programs that were used in any kind of production scenario. And so I think I never really thought of myself as an engineer. And so my natural kind of entry point into non-basketball things, like once I transitioned out of playing basketball professionally into other professional work, my kind of natural inclination was to go into non-technical roles. And I started out with kind of community building roles, and kind of marketing focused roles, BD focused roles. And I would get this constant frustration at being the person that's interacting with customers or users or the community and not being able to tangibly affect change on the thing that we're building, right? I would get endlessly frustrated at saying, hey, this user, has this problem or this request or whatever, and it going for months and there just being no response to it. And so then my kind of next, my solution to that was to move into product focused roles, so product management type roles. And there I had kind of tangibly more control over what was being able to kind of close that feedback loop, but would still get frustrated at not being able to directly implement it. And so then I moved to just writing code. And I think the combination of obviously having the hobbyist background in engineering, along with reviewing and I guess like at a high level auditing a bunch of the code that teams that I'd worked with or projects that I was interacting with had produced. It turned out I had absorbed some of that information by osmosis over the course of several years until like the first time I tried to write a smart contract, it actually turned out all right. Like it knew what it was supposed to do. And so, yeah, I mean, I think maybe the context there is like what I'm I guess all right at is just learning on demand, like learning whatever skills I need to be able to be functional in any given role. And so, yeah, I was able to step into kind of more engineering focused roles. And now I guess I've had a good bit of experience across many different roles within a whole bunch of different organizations. And so, yeah, I'm able to translate reasonably well between them. And then, yeah, I guess like where that's all led me, I, after the DAO, worked with a handful of different organizations, most notably worked with Gnosis, led the Conditional Tokens framework team for a while. The Conditional Tokens are the underlying technology for the various prediction markets that Gnosis was working on, also the underlying technology for Polymarket, SIA, and a handful of other prediction markets that are still alive today. And then when we at Gnosis decided to wind down support for the Conditional Tokens framework, I shifted gears internally and founded Gnosis Guild inside of Gnosis to focus on designing and implementing the infrastructure for the Gnosis DAO. And so then that team for the next couple of years did needs-driven development for the Gnosis DAO, which resulted in Zodiac as a standard for modular on-chain entities. And we decided to spin Gnosis Guild out from Gnosis in 2023 to start operating a bit more autonomously with kind of more ecosystem partners, and then also as a kind of a venture studio type thing. So Enclave is our most recent venture, which is a protocol for encrypted execution environments. We're using the combination of zero-knowledge proofs, fully homomorphic encryption, and multi-party computation to create this really interesting alternative to trusted execution environments where you get these hardware guarantees. We're building kind of similar affordances for mostly for kind of aggregation-based use cases, but using cryptographic guarantees and game theory rather than hardware-based guarantees. Yeah, I guess that's a somewhat long-winded way of getting to what I'm currently working on from where I was, but yeah, it gives you a good background.
It's pretty messed, but very beautiful story, right?
Yeah.
How you ended up there. So I have a few questions like regarding that a bit because I'm really curious. So you've said that you've been like a professional basketball player, and how do you think this shaped you and your mindset in like also like achieving things that you achieved or being in where you are? Like, what do you feel was this like impact of having this sport mindset and what it is actually, especially
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest things that you take away from, or at least I've taken away from playing sports at a high level is work ethic, right? Like just being willing and able to really exhaust yourself, really push your limits, both physically and mentally over extended periods of time in order to improve or you kind of achieve an outcome. Also, there's a tremendous amount of interpersonal skill that's necessary to compete and achieve at a high level in team-based sports. So kind of understanding team dynamics, understanding how to interact with people in high pressure scenarios and in intense scenarios, you know, when blood is pumping and testosterone is pumping and you know, like it's those being able to perform in those kind of environments and keep a level head and ultimately produce outcomes that you're wanting is a critical skill set, and then I think it translates well to other fields. I don't know.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I feel a lot here because like my grandfather, he's like a professional sport guy, and he has like PhD and he's a professor and he's teaching teachers like who like teaching trainers.
Oh, right.
How to train. And I feel this influence a lot, even though I was not doing sports professionally, but I really feel this influence of my grandfather kind of like pushing me all the time, like go, right. Like go to the limit, do more, be the first. And that was kind of always there. So, and I feel that is something really important, like that shaped me.
Yeah, and maybe so from the kind of coaching side of things and the theory side of things, I think another thing is that you kind of get out of sports is an understanding of process, right? That an understanding of failure being part of a process towards success, right? And that's made very explicitly obvious when you're playing sports, when you're training, when you're trying to improve at sports. You know, like you cannot enter a sport and immediately be the best person in the game, right? It takes a long time, a lot of practice, a lot of failures, a lot of setbacks, and so like having that understanding and mentality baked in from years of sports, then it transfers really well into other disciplines, right? Where you can dive in and understand that you're gonna kind of suck at it to start with, but by developing a process and kind of seeing it through, you can upskill into anything.
Yeah, 100%. Or maybe you can give some sort of advice for people who want to start coding but never go there. They probably don't even start. Just because, you know, when you have like a more humanitarian side, maybe education or background, and you work in marketing, product, whatever roles, and you don't go like hands-on on coding, because I feel sometimes that some people have this sort of barrier, like I'm a non-technical person, I like, it's not for me. So what did you have this sort of like glass ceiling or like barrier inside of you, and maybe some tools or resources that you could recommend just to easy try coding?
Yeah, so I think I did have a little bit of this. Like I said, when I came out of basketball, my natural inclination was to move into non-technical roles because I think I had that perception of myself that I'm not, I hadn't done any kind of real coding and not produced anything that anyone had used in production, and so surely I couldn't go into an engineering kind of focused role or it just was beyond me to do that in any kind of professional capacity. My I don't know, I took the long route for that, I guess, where it was just through building frustration over many years that eventually I was like, I'm going to write this thing. I'm not relying on anyone else to do it. I'm going to get it done. I think the more practical route to that is just to, like, regardless of your role, whether you're in a technical or a non-technical role, regardless of whether you think you might want to be in a technical role, understanding, being able to being able to understand programming languages, being able to understand code is hugely valuable, regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of what kind of role you're in. Just because it's like being able to understand another. If you speak English and German, then you have a whole additional world. Like I only speak English, unfortunately. And I think the same is true for programming languages, right? Like you can even develop a rudimentary understanding of a programming language or as a programming kind of at a high level, then you open up access to a whole nother world. One resource that I found really, really valuable, and I didn't read until much later, but I think would have been a really nice thing to read earlier on, is this book. I forget the author's name. The title of the book is Algorithms to Live By. Mm-hmm. And it's essentially taking a bunch of computer science concepts and then applying them to everyday life. So things like sorting algorithms or kind of memory management algorithms and applying them to everyday life. So like a really interesting practical example of this from the book. The author is talking about memory management, and in particular, there's a concept of first in, first out, or first in, last out. Last in, first out. Yeah, last in, first out. And essentially, the author makes the argument that the kind of classic trope of like a professor's desk just being a like absolute scramble mess of papers, that at face value, this looks like a horribly unorganized way to manage your memory, manage your desk space. Mm-hmm. But in practice, it actually turns out to be very efficient, right? Because it's like a physical implementation of this last in, first out algorithm, right? You have a paper that you're reading, you put it down on the desk, and more than likely, the next paper that you're going to need to pick up, the next paper that you're going to need to read is the most recent one that you put down. So this last in, first out. So this chaos of a desk just piled with papers actually turns out to be a really efficient way of managing memory, managing space, which is counterintuitive. But it's interesting to look at your interactions with the real world from the point of view of computer science, or from the point of view of the decades of research that have gone into efficiently optimizing algorithms in the context of computer science, and how those actually can map quite well to the real world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think it's very useful for people who like start to go into coding, like to understand this experience, and also actually have this example of you like showing that it's really possible and you can do this like leap and be kind of cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, and but I wanted to jump a bit more to your like professional side. So thanks a lot for sharing your stories and your insights of your career. I think that's super useful for people, especially if they're just in the beginning of their journey, right? To like know how it could be, and then you can do this, that, and somewhere else. And that's not always obvious, because we tend to do this linear life model.
This kind of tunnel vision, right?
Yeah.
I think this
it never happens. So it's really nice to know that it's normal to be messy, sometimes in your life.
There's a really interesting visualization that I've seen a few times where it talks about, it's like you have this branching pathway that's led you to where you are, and it looks very reductionist, right? When you look at all of the possibilities that you could have taken, and you ended up on this one particular branch. But then when you expand that out in the other direction going forward, you realize, okay, I've actually got the same kind of complexity, the same branching possibilities out kind of into the future. And yeah, I think we have a tendency to have tunnel vision there, but in reality, have this incredible diversity of potential things that we could do, and it's just a matter of being willing to explore them.
Yeah. Everything is possible. That's, I mean, also nice to remember that everything is possible and you can be anything and everything. So, but let's jump a bit to Gnosis Guild. Can you please, like, briefly, for people who don't know, just briefly, like, explain what's that, and maybe also, like, one quick take on DAO, how you see this? Is it like an entity? And also, it would be cool if you could share some, like, interesting use cases of DAO nowadays, like, really successful and really cool ones. Because, like, when it did just emerged, everyone was so hyped, like, yeah, that was so cool. But now, I mean, at least in my informational bubble, I don't see a lot of really cool examples. I'm not into this bubble once again, but still I don't see really loud cases of like something cool happening with DAO. But I really think that's a cool tool, like a cool entity, and it should be used more. So I'm sure you have, more like cool use cases of that.
Yeah, so I guess to give context on Gnosis Guild again, we originally spun up inside of Gnosis to design and implement the infrastructure for the Gnosis DAO. That led us to a handful of insights on best practices for designing and building on-chain entities, DAOs, and individual accounts, really just like a standard for modular on-chain accounts, modular on-chain entities. The idea being that you have a core account that we call an avatar, and that you should be able to plug in any kind of arbitrary logic you want to control that account. And critically, in most cases, you will not make all of the right decisions immediately. Upfront, it's really hard to account for the next year's worth of needs on the day that you deploy your account. It's even harder to account for the next 2 years, the next 5 years, or the next 10 years, or the next 100 years. And so like long-lived entities, long-lived organizations will almost certainly have to grow and evolve and change over time. And so we started talking about this idea of progressive decentralization and really advocating for building organizations that have the capacity from day one to grow and evolve, right? To change how they operate, to change what mechanisms control them, to change the set of people that have influence over it, really like for the organization to be a fluid and dynamic thing, as opposed to a static kind of immutable thing that has relatively little capacity to grow, or has a huge amount of friction anytime that it does want to make a change. So low friction, progressive decentralization was a big part of the motivation for Zodiac, the standard that we built on top of the safe. And building on top of the safe was really just this kind of pragmatic choice. It's the most widely used smart contract account. It was by orders of magnitude the most used at the time. There's now a handful of different competing standards, but I think the safe still has many more users and much more value secured. So it still is the kind of pragmatic choice for this. And then in terms of how Gnosis Guild has evolved since then, we spun out from Gnosis just to allow us to act a little bit more autonomously, to continue being kind of experimental and weird, and then also to start spinning up some other ventures outside of just the kind of access control tooling that we've been building. And so again, Enclave is this protocol that we've spun up, and it's the idea behind that is essentially we're wanting to enable collaborative confidential compute. The backstory for Enclave is that we were originally trying to solve for secret ballots. Right? There's this good reason that every worthwhile democracy in the world uses a secret ballot. It's because open ballots enable corruption, collusion, coercion, bribery, which ultimately then create bad outcomes. They distort the outcome of voting systems. And so secret ballots are the kind of solution to this. The current state of the art for secret ballots is taking a vote, writing on a piece of paper, dropping it in a box with everyone else's box, with everyone else's votes, and shaking the box, right? Like that's state of the art secret ballots. And the reason that the kind of digital voting hasn't supplanted that, hasn't I guess become more broadly adopted, is it turns out to be really hard to build secret ballots in a digital voting system that don't leave a footprint, that don't leave a receipt that then someone looking to bribe, coerce, collude with, and ultimately corrupt the voting system can use to enable that corruption. And so this was the problem we were wanting to solve for. We were heavily inspired by MACI, the minimal anti-collusion infrastructure, which is voting built as a ZK circuit. The challenge with it, though, is that if you're using purely ZK, you, in order to produce a proof about something, you have to know the data that you're proving, right? And so in the case of MACI, you have a trusted actor, the coordinator, who must decrypt all of the votes. And so you rely on this person, this party, to be perfectly trustworthy. And if they are corrupted, then the system loses its privacy guarantees. And so we wanted to figure out how do we distribute trust in that coordinator. Arrived at this architecture using the combination of zero-knowledge proofs, fully homomorphic encryption, and multi-party computation to enable that. So ZKPs for verifiability, MPC to distribute trust across multiple coordinators, multiple actors, multiple party members, and then fully homomorphic encryption so that we can encrypt inputs, do the aggregation, kind of tally the votes, produce a ciphertext output that can then be decrypted by the threshold of MPC parties, and without ever having to decrypt any of the input or the intermediate states, and then obviously ZKPs to make that whole process verifiable. And I think the real light bulb moment with Enclave was realizing that voting is just one of a whole class of applications that benefit from this type of execution environment, right? That ability to take multiple inputs from many mutually distrusting parties, produce an aggregation, and have that aggregation, that output be verifiable. Yeah, so this is kind of how we arrived at Enclave. And I've forgotten the last part of your question because I got sidetracked.
Yeah, so I was asking about the real use cases that inspire and that really working well, because I don't hear much of them recently, unfortunately. So I wanted to ask you.
No. So I mean, at a high level, maybe I would say there's kind of two broad classes of DAOs, right? One is protocol style DAOs that have a very narrow scope on what their members, participants, constituents, citizens, whatever it is, can do, and like what the variables that they have control over are. And then these kind of broader, more firm-like DAOs. They're essentially something analogous to traditional firms, traditional organizations that can have a very broad mandate. They don't have that same strict set of parameters that they have control over. The former have been much more successful than the latter. So I'd say the former, the best examples are blockchains themselves, right? Blockchains are DAOs. You have a system that's being controlled by a broad set of participants. They have rules in how they can engage with the system. They have a consensus mechanism that defines how they reach consensus on what the current state of the chain is, and then they have a protocol that they must follow in order to publish new information, publish new blocks. And so I think, Bitcoin, Ethereum, some of the other blockchains are good examples of DAOs. But I think that's the question is probably more about that second class, these more firm-like DAOs. And I think some good examples of these firm-like DAOs that have been quite successful. I think the Aave DAO is great. It's really highly functioning. The Lido DAO seems to be progressing in that way quite well. I think early on there was some questions around it, but it seemed like it evolved really nicely. I think the Gnosis DAO is working its way towards being pretty functional. Nouns is a really interesting case. I think I love the noun mechanism, this idea of a kind of slow start. You auction off essentially citizenship in the DAO once daily, and so it forces a slow start, but then it also creates this kind of slow attack vector. If you're wanting to economically attack the DAO, then you either have to go and purchase all of the citizenship tokens, the Nouns tokens, on an open market, which most of them are not listed, or you have to sit there and win the auction for a year in a row or something like that. So it's an interesting mechanism from that point of view. Obviously, Nouns has had some challenges as well, but it's been a pretty interesting ecosystem to watch, and I think has been, for the most part, quite highly functioning and quite successful as a DAO. I think there are some good examples. There are also a lot of really terrible examples, DAOs or DAO-like things. But this is true of organizations as well, right? You think about startups, the common trope there is that 90% or more of startups fail. I think there's no reason that the same shouldn't be true for DAOs, right? Most will be terrible, most will fail, but some will be fantastic. In terms of tools, like interesting tooling that exists, or is maybe some of the newer, more novel tooling that I've seen. I'm a huge fan of HATS protocol. This is a protocol for essentially defining roles and creating really dynamic role assignments within organizations, and critically is useful for creating kind of hierarchical structure within DAOs. And I think this is one of the DAOs are kind of a counterculture to, or at least are largely seen. I think a lot of the people that are interested in DAOs see it as a counterculture to traditional organizations, and particularly to traditional hierarchical structures, right? And the unfortunate reality of that is that we end up throwing out, the last few hundred years of optimization of the firm, right? Like organizations, firms are actually quite efficient organizational structures. They do have a tendency, obviously, to concentrate power, but that kind of hierarchical structure is efficient in terms of actually getting stuff done. And so I think that the challenge for DAOs is to avoid that centralization of power, that capture, so making capture-resistant organizations that don't throw out all of that organizational efficiency that you get from a traditional firm structure. And this is what something like HATS does really well, is like, say, we want to have token holders essentially operate, or DAO members operate at the top level of the organization. They get to define what the kind of top level structure looks like, and then cede power to the hierarchy to then decide how to operate kind of further on down the tree. And so in this way, you should be able to get both capture resistance and the same kind of efficiency that you get out of a traditional organization. And then another tool that I'm really excited about is MetaLex. So this is essentially a suite of tools that finding the kind of intersection between encoding organizational logic as programs and encoding it in kind of legal systems, and packaged in a way that's very consumable and kind of gets the benefit of both. Two tools that we're not working on that I think people should check out: HATS protocol and Lex.
Okay, I'm happy that they're a good example and they're working, operating, and bringing something. So actually, I expect in like some distant future it will be kind of a norm of. I hope so. But shifting a bit towards like privacy, since we are Web3 privacy, we have to talk about it. So in your perspective, like for many people, privacy is something like, okay, I need to hide something. But can you expand a bit on the role of privacy in DAOs? And then just in general, your take on the the state maybe of privacy nowadays?
So, I think DAOs are a pretty narrow focus for it. I tell you, I'm really interested at a slightly high level there. So privacy, I'll talk about how I've been talking about it for Enclave, but I think it's generalizable beyond Enclave. In the case of Enclave, we see kind of two broad buckets of use cases, right? One is where having strong privacy guarantees improves the integrity of the system, right? And so this is true for the voting use case that we talked about, right? Where if there's an information asymmetry, if someone's able to bribe, collude, coerce, then they can corrupt the system and produce and distort its outcomes. And there's a class of use cases that fit this same kind of value proposition, right? Where having strong guarantees around privacy improves the guarantees around integrity of the system. So sealed bid auctions are another. You get private voting, sealed bid auctions, I think, are the two really canonical examples there. They're the kind of beachhead use cases that we're chasing for Enclave, is building out solutions for that. And then there's a whole other class of use cases where the value proposition is around access to or liability from data, right? In the case of systems where you're trying to aggregate information, you traditionally have had to either take or give custody of data to one entity that then kind of does the aggregation. And so from the point of view of, say, an organization that wants to aggregate, wants to generate some information, some insight from the aggregation of data, then it has it will have a bunch of challenges in terms of getting access to that data. So take a concrete example, let's say a medical researcher, right? They want to aggregate some data from a handful of different healthcare providers, and they have a whole bunch of regulatory hurdles to jump through in order to be able to legally take custody of that data. And then once they have custody of it, they now have this huge liability because they likely have a bunch of sensitive data that if they mishandle or misuse, ends up having the potential to have really negative outcomes for the people whose data it is. And so I think, there's this tendency for us to think about, or for a lot of people to think about privacy as this, like reclusive trait, right? Like I don't want you to know what I'm doing, and people immediately kind of fall back into thinking about some people immediately fall back into thinking about it's privacy is only for people that have something to hide, kind of thing. But in reality, I think that privacy is actually this really important feature of systems, both from an integrity point of view, but also from an access and liability point of view, right? You can improve your access to insights as well as reducing your liability from data by building systems that are designed deliberately to not expose sensitive data. So it's a fundamentally critical property for a bunch of systems to either exist or to function correctly.
So one topic you already tackled a bit, but just making it a bit more narrow. And I want you to introduce your term of like practical pluralism that you have to people who don't know about it, because I love it. And also to maybe reflect on it from the optics of like privacy angle, like, and is it a part of it? If yes, like, then why?
Yeah. So this idea of practical pluralism, Kevin Owocki and I wrote a short article about this a couple of years ago. And the core thesis is it's that systems and organizations and societies tend to produce better outcomes, tend to be stronger, more resilient, more capture resistant when they embrace this idea of pluralism across the kind of full stack. And the kind of canonical example in Web3 of pluralism is client diversity, right? Ethereum, somewhat uniquely in the blockchain ecosystem, has gone to tremendous lengths to encourage a diverse set of clients, of execution nodes and consensus nodes to exist, both to exist and for people to actually use them. And again, it's been a really difficult task to incentivize those teams and to encourage people to actually run those clients. But the benefit of it is a much more resilient network than any others in terms of its capacity to handle bugs in any one of those clients, right? If any one of them has implemented the spec incorrectly for some reason, and produces a bug that kind of knocks those clients offline, then the network persists, the network continues to operate because that client is only a small subset of the total pool of clients. But the same is true, I think, across the whole stack in Web3 and across a much broader range of use cases and applications. Again, from everything from protocol level things all the way up to society level. At the kind of application level in Web3, I think it's really interesting and really valuable. One of the kind of underrated value propositions about smart contracts is that they are a backend, kind of open backend that any application can kind of plug into. And so it's really, really, I think, important and beneficial to have multiple front-end clients that can interact with any given smart contract, or at least any smart contracts of sufficient size, right? If you think about, say, an AMM, maybe AMM's not an AMM, sure. So you've got Uniswap, for example, and there's literally hundreds of as unique front ends that you could access that will ultimately route you into the Uniswap contracts, right? And that means that if, for whatever reason, the Uniswap official application goes down, you still have an alternate route to interacting with that. And so it makes in, again, this layer of resilience and a layer of kind of capture resistance, which is, it produces better outcomes for users in general. And again, I think that same lesson is applicable across a whole bunch of different applications and venues, well beyond just Web3.
Yeah, 100%. And that was interesting. And thanks for sharing for the people of this concept, which is quite elegant, I would say. And I wish it was something more organic and natural and like a default, I would say, right, in our world, so that we could evolve. And then there is my next question. Imagine we are 30 years from now, and we won. We have the internet that we wish for, private, secure, and decentralized, whatever you imagine it. So how does it look like, and how does a life look like in this case, when we're in this tech paradise?
Yeah, interesting. There is I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I always have at least one sci-fi novel on the go, sometimes multiple. There was one that I read maybe a year or two ago now called A Half-Built Garden. I can't remember the name of the author. I'm really bad at names of people for some reason. But it's A Half-Built Garden was a really, really interesting novel just in general. It's a kind of totally different take on the alien invasion narrative. But one part of what I liked about it was the way that kind of human society was organized in this near future world. It was, I guess, post collapse of the current kind of set of governance regimes and whatnot, and part of kind of human society had organized into this collection of what they called watersheds, which were just much more locally autonomous communities that I guess were kind of AI enhanced. So they used a distributed AI of some description to kind of mediate all of their interactions and ultimately kind of surface the collective opinion and collective will on decision making in a way that was very, I don't know, lived kind of holistically and in a kind of ecological balance with their environment. And I don't know, it was a lovely picture of the future. It's one that I would love to see manifest.
Okay, we'll see. And just quick, maybe final recommendation for someone who is just entering the world of privacy. Maybe I don't know, 3 tools or 3 habits that you can easily like acquire and go for it and be easily like much more private than like before, like for like entry level?
Yeah. A VPN.
Yeah.
There's lots of good ones. I am a fan of Proton VPN, Proton Mail. Basically, all of Proton's tools are great. So I would highly recommend people check that out, particularly folks new to dealing with privacy or wanting to be kind of privacy conscious. It's a very accessible suite of tools. Use Signal. Or Session, Signal and Session are great messaging applications. And then, I don't know, maybe switch to something like Brave Browser, where you can have a little bit more granular control about what information you share as you browse. There are probably three relatively low lift tips for just getting a little bit better at digital privacy.
Yeah, awesome. And final advice of you, like for the students of our academy, like can you recommend one piece of like cultural thing, like I don't know, film, podcast, playlist, book, whatever that you recently was inspired by, and you think it can like enrich like a general understanding of the world and like the life of person?
I'm going to go back to that book that I mentioned earlier, the Algorithms to Live By. I think it's been really impactful for me, and it's definitely one that folks should read. For me, I think it's in some cases justified my weird quirks in how I organize myself and interact with the world. In other cases, made me realize that I was doing things that were really inefficient and that could improve on. And it was just a fun read. And then, again, for folks that are into computer science, then it can help you kind of apply what you already do in computer science to the real world. And then for folks that are not into computer science, they can help you to take some of that learning and understand it in a much more tangible, practical way. So check it out. It's a great book.
Yeah, awesome advice. So thank you. Thanks for coming. Yeah, it was a beautiful interview. Thank you guys for listening to us. I think it should be very useful. Ciao.